So welcome. You are joining us today. You are attending a webinar presented by ProjectWorks and WorkGuru. Today, our panel is discussing the topic, There's Life Beyond WorkflowMax by Xero, End-of-Life Alternatives. I'm Heather Smith and I'm your host for today. During the session, we encourage you to chat in the chat area like you have been doing and ask any questions that you may have in the Q&A area. And we have a lot of experts monitoring both areas. So I'm going to pop the agenda on the screen. Let's see if I can figure this bit out. Yes. There's the agenda. I'm going to pop the agenda on the screen. And as you are looking at that, let me just run through a few of the learning outcomes for today. We're going to learn about the product features, capabilities, and differences between ProjectWorks and WorkGuru. We're going to understand preparation, timeliness, timelines, and processes involved in migrating data and business processes away from WorkflowMax by Xero. We'll hear about client transitions from WorkflowMax by Xero through case studies that highlight both the challenges and the opportunities. With that, I'd like to briefly introduce myself. So my name is Heather Smith. I'm a chartered accountant, certified bookkeeper and writer, and I'm very focused on the accounting app space. I strategically partner with a number of solutions, including both ProjectWorks and WorkGurus. So today I'm your host, the controller of the slides, and I also have the bell. I'm the controller of the bell if we need it. So now I'd like to welcome my fellow panelists who have kindly joined us today, and you can see them here. Now, in the order of the slide, can you share who you are, where you're from, and what you're bringing to today's session today? So let's start with you, Heidi, if that's okay.
Cool. Well, hi everyone. My name is Heidi Seal. I'm an operations consultant from Tauranga, New Zealand, and my consulting practice is called Business Sense. We serve businesses nationwide in New Zealand and a handful across the mighty land of Australia too. And today I'm bringing 15 years of experience from the accounting and software implementation space, a real life dose of WorkflowMax changeover insights from the past 12 months, and also some enthusiasm because this is a topic that I love.
Fabulous. Matt Peng, sorry.
Matthew Peng, founder of Business Continuum, operating for about 10 years now, servicing clients primarily in Australia. We are in the professional services space, helping accounting firms largely, but also a range of other sectors consider applications to run their projects using a range of solutions in market that are within the Xero ecosystem. And here today sort of to share my experience on working with the likes of WorkGuru and ProjectWorks.
Great.
Fabulous.
Hey all, I'm Matt Hayter, based here in Wellington, New Zealand. I'm a co-founder and was formerly CEO at ProjectWorks. More recently though, I've stepped into the role of Chief Product Officer. And I'm here today to really touch on some of the ProjectWorks features that may be new to people coming from WorkflowMax, and also maybe differ slightly to what the team at WorkGuru have. And big thanks to Tony for inviting me along today. And I'll also be happy to answer any ProjectWorks specific questions that anyone may have. Thank you.
Fabulous.
Thanks, Matt. Hi all, I'm Tony Harcourt. I'm one of the founders here at WorkGuru. Hopefully I bring an understanding of the differences between WorkflowMax and WorkGuru. And prior to that, I've also got about a decade of experience implementing WorkflowMax by Xero, which is kind of where the genesis for WorkGuru came from. So keen to understand people's migration issues, problems and questions, and hopefully I can bring some experience to that as well.
Thank you so much. So let's move to the first session, understanding the transition. And if I can hand across to you, Heidi, to talk about the triggers for change.
Yeah, sure. So last year in March, we were advised by WorkflowMax by Xero that WorkflowMax would be retired in June 2024. So it's not new news, but time certainly flies. So since then, BlueRock have been building an entirely new software platform to replace WorkflowMax. They bought the brand name, but did not inherit the code or the product or the platform. And so they've been busy building, some may call it WorkflowMax by BlueRock, some call it WorkflowMax 2. In the future, it will be known as WorkflowMax. So on the 26th of June, WorkflowMax as we know it will be turned off, the data will be gone. There won't be a read-only access. It will not exist. And so the trigger for change is that if you're using WorkflowMax, you need to find an alternative. It's mandatory that change is made for all that are relying on this platform for their business.
Thank you very much there, Heidi. Now, I'm not sure if you've got anything else to add there, Matthew, Peng, or we'll go straight to the market reaction.
Yeah, happy to sort of speak to this slide. That's right. So the confusion around WorkflowMax by BlueRock, I guess, is really just around ownership. So WorkflowMax by BlueRock is effectively available now. I guess the confusion or something for consideration for the audience and clients of our audience today is that it is not a natural migration to WorkflowMax by BlueRock. You'll have to opt in. So just be aware as you're speaking to clients around the opportunity to move to WorkflowMax by BlueRock, that you must opt in. You must enact a migration, because come the end of June or June 26th, you will have needed to have at least perform that final migration by then. Otherwise, your data will effectively be inaccessible. So this really gives us an opportunity today to sort of explore other solutions in markets, and we'll sort of talk about the industries that both WorkGuru and ProjectWorks serve. But you'll want to investigate, beyond what you've perhaps used for 1 or more years with WorkflowMax by Xero. Some of the other options that can enhance or complement your existing workflow now that you're perhaps in a position where you're looking for options. So yeah, really good time right now, and really at this particular juncture, probably one of the later points in time of the transition to really consider before it becomes too late.
Thank you for that. Let's anything else that anyone wants to say for that bit? Otherwise, I'll move to the next slide.
I think we're good.
Okay. So the solution. So we have here our comparative table. Can I hand across to you, Tony, for this one?
Yeah, sure. So probably the big differences, guys, is obviously between WorkflowMax by BlueRock and both ProjectWorks and WorkGuru, but ProjectWorks and WorkGuru both have a fair bit in common. So there's a lot of stuff that we do together, but we've both got a very similar shared history. Matt Hayter and I both come out of consulting backgrounds, which is where both ProjectWorks and WorkGuru came from. But some of the things that we've put on this comparative slide is just so you can see some of our history. And probably the key things that people want to know is how long you've been around, because people always want to know that for software solutions. Who do you service? So for the ProjectWorks guys, huge focus on the professional services and consulting. For us, more engineering, construction, fabrication kind of things. And what's your pricing? Those tend to be the 3 key questions that we get asked. So we thought we'd put that up front in a comparative table between the 2 of us.
Fantastic. So now to the common features.
100%. So like I said, we've got a lot of things in common coming out of both of our consulting backgrounds. So you won't find us fighting over the things that we both do well. So both ProjectWorks and WorkGuru have extensive functionality around project management, invoicing, quoting, multi-currency support and multi-location tax support. So really important for if you've got different jurisdictions for VAT or GST. I know some UK partners were sitting in on this and keen to know that we both had VAT support. Yes, we do. We both have lead management capability, custom fields, reporting, and work in progress, all the key things that project management software need, as well as customizable dashboards. And the key thing is that we're ready now, we're tested, we're trusted, and we're supported worldwide. So, huge amount of stuff that we do have in common, and both platforms are, service different areas, I suppose, of the project or job management space.
Thank you. Matt, is there anything else that you'd like to add there? And I do want to highlight the custom fields. They're advanced and they are slightly different, aren't they, across the features?
Yeah, I think Tony's covered that really well. And I think the key kind of message there is we've both come from consulting. We both kind of know this industry. And while where our products have landed, and we'll talk to that in a minute, has kind of varied slightly. Really, this core is quite similar. And we both do custom fields. There's an asterisk there because the way that we've implemented those is slightly different. I think Tony's going to talk a bit more around the specifics of the WorkGuru way of tackling those shortly.
Thank you. Target industries. Back to you, Matt Hayter.
Yeah, so like Tony said, we both kind of spun out of consultancies. ProjectWorks spun out of a software consultancy, and we've really found our stride kind of within these 4 industries. So software consultants, other software consultants, makes up a big portion of our customer base. Also kind of the more general management consulting side, which incorporates a whole kind of raft of more niche verticals, I guess you'd call them. That engineering consultancy and architecture firm side, it's really for us, it's sort of project-based organizations that rely heavily on recording time and billing hours to their customers.
Thank you. Anything there you'd want to talk about, Tony?
Yeah, cool. It's very similar for us. It's the things that made us go and build WorkGuru were functionalities that we used to have to deny to clients. So that fabrication and construction specifically kind of space. So fabrication was always stock control and purchasing with their project management. So timesheets, stock control, purchasing, and all of the invoices for that. And construction, specifically things like variations, retentions, progress claims, all the kind of things that, you know, as you get a bit bigger, your construction industry or fabrication industry, spreadsheets just don't cut that anymore. So that's why we built those kind of key things in for us. And that's probably, you know, one of our major points of difference.
Excellent. So back to you, Matt. We can sort of deep dive into points of difference for ProjectWorks here.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. So I guess one of the key sort of points of difference for us is we've got a lot of focus around kind of forecasting, particularly around revenue forecasting, and then also through, and this kind of couples with the second point here, resource planning. We have a forward view of kind of staff utilization. So if you're managing a big kind of hour-based workforce, a workforce that's billing by the hour, you can kind of see how much capacity people have, where there's bench time, who's over-resourced, all of that kind of capacity planning, utilization sort of side of the equation. And we also have some strong functionality around doing your gross margin reporting, and that's kind of projected, current and historic, as well as sort of how you're burning down on your budget. Second point there, sort of resource planning I've touched on. Expense management. So both our platforms do sort of what you would consider company paid expenses. ProjectWorks does have kind of a personal expense module on there as well. One of our other sort of key features is that we do support multi-entity. So I think the largest WorkflowMax migration we've done to date has actually merged 8 different discrete WorkflowMax instances together. So a large organization that was running 8. So you can get in there and kind of do all the kind of permissioning down if you need to sort of segregate access to like a single entity within your one ProjectWorks kind of instance. We have a leave calendar. That's really because knowing when people are on leave is really important when you're doing resource planning. We have an integration with 12D Synergy. So if there's anybody in the kind of architecture engineering space, you may work with them. They've actually built an integration with us. So when you create your project and set that up in ProjectWorks, it'll automatically kind of create the mirrored project in 12D. And then these last couple of points are really more around your broader ecosystem. So we're making a large investment in sort of integrating with HubSpot. So we have multiple ways that that can work. And also if you're using sort of Jira and DevOps for your task management, I think the WorkGuru guys have more task management functionality built into their platform, whereas we've gone more kind of integration route. So if you're using Jira specifically, we've put a lot of time into that. And while we don't have a mobile app, we have a heavily mobile optimized site. So you can kind of do your time and expenses through your mobile device still.
Thank you very much, Matt, for sharing that. And let's flip over and give Tony the floor. Work Guru, points of difference.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Like Matt said, we focus a little bit more on the task management internally. So whether that's project elements, phases, tasks, sections of projects to work on, or scheduling those things, we handle a lot of that internally. And then the probably mobile and workshop apps. So we have both a phone app, which is a one-to-one. I use my phone to clock in the field or wherever I'm at. But the kiosk app, the workshop app, is a big one for us, particularly for the fabrication clients and people who are, for example, on mine sites and they're not allowed phones, but you might have 10 people or 20 people coming to clock in and out on a single tablet. So that's a really big thing for a lot of our clients. I'd say probably 60% of our fabrication clients at least use the kiosk apps to allow that many to one device clock in, so you don't have people, their heads in their phones on their workshop floor as well, which is a bit of a safety risk. Advanced purchasing. So like Matt said, we both deal with company related expenses. We've got a very extensive purchasing module that deals with everything from foreign currency conversions to landed costs to off purchase order landed costs to splitting purchase orders between projects to some for stock, some not for stock, to the whole bit. So purchasing in WorkGuru is an enormous part of what we do. A lot of that comes from the fact that my co-founder is one of the world's biggest inventory nerds. So shout out to Michael Davis. And another one that we deal with, which is comes out of our experience there, is project groups. So project groups is a really very random thing, but we came up with the way of grouping projects together in an arbitrary thing to be able to report on groups of related projects. So for construction, it's really useful for dealing with projects with variations. So you can have a primary project and then variation projects around that, and you can report on the group of projects as a whole, but the individual projects, and see where you're making money or not making money. That's primarily used in construction, but we also do have it in both service and manufacturing capabilities, where people might be building multiple trailers for one particular client, and they want to track each of those as an individual build, but then group them together as a project. We've got some pretty advanced functionality around price tiers, both supplier price tiers and client price tiers, and this is both on tasks and products. So you can specify client group pricing for products and tasks. And you can also override that on product level and go down to customer specific pricing. So if you've got, it's always the minors, I don't know why it's always the big minors, but if you've got client contract pricing that you're not allowed to change, and if it might be specific, then your client contract price overrides the price tier, overrides the default price. So we've got enormous pricing flexibility there. We touched on the advanced custom fields before, slightly different. So one of the big things for us in custom fields is that we allow custom fields pretty much everywhere, but also we've recently released functionality to allow different custom field groups. So if you've got two different types of projects, so particularly for our clients who do fabrication and install, so particularly of steel work on construction jobs, you might have a group of project custom fields that relate specifically to the fabrication of elements, and then a specific group of custom fields that relate to the install. So you can actually toggle between projects what set of custom fields you're going to use. Stock control. So one of the big reasons that we built WorkGuru to start off with was that people couldn't track products that they had in stock as well as using their timesheets. So it is an optional module for those of you who are construction or consulting engineers, not wanting the same functionality that ProjectWorks has. You don't need to have the stock control optional, but you certainly have it. And then internal production. So if you're building things that go onto the shelf or being used for other projects, we've got a fully fledged internal production module as well that handles internal manufacturing.
Thank you so much, Tony and Matt, for sharing both of the points of differences there. And I'm sure for people listening in, it's understanding those key features to help you in that selection process. Let's move to section 3, the migration and developing a migration strategy. Can I ask you, Heidi, to take this away?
Yeah, sure. So I'll talk through these points. So time frame. There is a spectrum of approaches, I guess, when it comes to the migration strategy in general. So from my experience, I've seen plenty of businesses who are ready to embrace change. Maybe they've recognized that within their current platform, the features, the functionality, what they need for where their business has evolved to is no longer a fit, and have seen this as an opportunity to make proactive change. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are others who just want to keep business as usual, want to keep continuity, no disruption. They don't want to change an interface. They just want to wake up and it be the same on the 27th of June. So both are kind of valid, but it's all about, we have to have a strategy that that gets us to the 27th of June happy, healthy, and with a business that's intact. So as far as time frame goes, my advice is sooner rather than later. I've had businesses that we've migrated last year. They're all in the new product, functioning, happy, merry, oblivious to anything that needs to be done now. So sooner rather than later is best. For those who are moving to the Blue Rock product, it has been a little bit tricky to do things as soon as they might like, because there's a few features and functionality that are still being rolled out, but at least getting a migration strategy together as soon as possible is my absolute advice here. In terms of data, as we've said, all WorkflowMax data disappears on the 26th of June. No one's sorting that for you. There is no backup that will get delivered. It's 100% on you to sort that. So while having a backup is super important, but if it comes to moving to a platform, the migration of that data depends a little bit on the platform. ProjectWorks largely takes care of data migration, and there's a lot of conversations that go on around how that is then presented and filtered to look how we want it to in ProjectWorks. And then WorkGuru has a migration tool that brings across all the heavy lifting of the data, with a few areas to be repopulated and tweaked to make everything align exactly how we need. So your time frame, your data depends on the software. Change management. So this is a massive area that can either cause a massive win or a massive disruption to the business. So there's always going to be change management required for these kind of things. And I like to try and frame it up as improvement opportunities. So ways that we can manage the change management really well is front loading the testing and the training, so teams feel in control, they feel confident, they feel not in the dark with a new system being put in place. Having a systems champion in-house for a client makes a massive difference in terms of ownership and the success of this change. And then also just being realistic that there will be bumps, there will be challenges. It's very outside of the norm for everything to go perfectly, but everything is figure-outable with the right support and approach. So that's what I'd say to change management. And the last one on business process, mapping out current business processes and translating it to the new platform is important. I think it's Tony who coined the phrase, it's like rewiring your brain. And so like most of the time, the things that we run into that are a bit tricky is because we're trying to do something the old way in a new platform, and that doesn't lead to good places. So having those business processes mapped out and what they'd look like in the new system is super important. And my experience is this changeover is just helping businesses nudge closer and closer to a gold standard of process, to reassessing, to having the guardrails of different softwares that kind of force them to be better. It might be a bit uncomfortable in the interim, but in the end, it best serves the staff and it best serves the business, and is a real opportunity if we can get those business processes translated beautifully to set them up for much better data, much better business efficiency, and much better operations. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that area.
Thank you so much, Heidi. After the 26th of June, do I have read-only access to my data sitting in WorkflowMax by Xero?
No.
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 Matthew, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think Heidi's done a brilliant job in sort of prefacing the 4 talking points. I do think that business process, just to add perhaps just the business process piece, very useful to map as soon as possible as well, to sort of investigate as you're sort of exploring the solutions presented today, and what the options might be for your business as well. It's gonna help you map that to what your business needs, to the software.
Thank you, Matthew. And we have come to the exciting part, WorkGuru case studies. Heidi, can we start with you to talk about this case study with the AV Project Management Company?
Yes, so this has been a great project. So this is a New Zealand-based company that delivers audiovisual equipment, but then also installs it. So it's not just a labour thing, it's not just an inventory thing, it's it's a beautiful combination. So the difficulties that they had in the current WorkflowMax platform is that there was no tracked inventory, and they had multiple locations through the country, so that was tracked in spreadsheets. A huge amount of serialized products that essentially were stored as notes data within the platform. They also kind of had a very flexible approach to the use of the cost screen, which was great for a lot of things, but it meant that in terms of data integrity, being able to have an audit trail on the job and kind of having a few guardrails that processes had to sit between, left them a bit open there. And then just the ability to schedule and report on a bunch of things to do with install and the breadth of reporting there. So there was a number of difficulties that they were making do with, and obviously, a large company, so changing is not something you take lightly, and so it had kind of made do for a number of years. So this was solved by WorkGuru. And just speaking to the transition process there, the data migration was perhaps a little bit more involved than your average transition. A very high number of SKUs, over 300 open projects, a huge amount of both ad hoc and purchase order costs on products, very SKU-based projects, and some really funky ways of interpreting the data in WorkflowMax. So the data migration, yeah, like I said, was a little bit more involved, interesting. I don't know what we're doing.
Difficult. It was tricky. It was a tricky one, Heidi. You're allowed to be honest.
So that. But in saying that, we were able to land the plane, right? So that was great to be able to do that. Change management, that's been a huge part of the transition process, rewiring a decent sized team's brain to understand the new platform and workflows, and some of the flexibility that existed now doesn't exist, but for the betterment of the business and the integrity of the data. Having those processes with more guardrails will ultimately lead them to be a better business, but is a learning experience for the team in the meantime. So that's a little bit about the transition. Ultimately, the outcome for this business will be, a lot clearer project health, able to be reviewed and reconciled at top level and in detail in several places throughout the software, better lead management, better scheduling of their field staff, a source of truth for forecast versus actuals at all time, clear visibility over not just the quantity, the serial number, and the location of their stock on hand, but also how many of each unit throughout the business, which is massive because they're often moving things on and off projects. Reportable serial numbers, so that there's an audit trail for how these serial numbers actually move from a purchase to a project to potentially back in stock to wherever else they might actually transition in real life. That can be reflected in the software. Loads less manual processing in a lot of areas, a lot less copy, pasting, ticking, unticking, yeah, a lot less there. And then the reporting for the management team is just going to be a lot more clear and transparent because the data is actually true to life. So I think it's going to be great. We're still, we're still getting the team really humming in it, but already there's some massive chunks of data processing that just won't exist on staff members' plates, and so they're already reaping the benefit of that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Heidi. If we can pass across to you, Matthew, Custom Signage Company. Can you let us know about that case study?
Yeah, for sure. It was actually a client that I originally brought onto WorkflowMax way back when. And so they had years and years of data, and they were using it to its fullest extent in terms of tracking of costs, running purchase orders, issuing quotes for everything. They probably needed a little bit more assistance with their lead management side of things. And so we've addressed that in the transition to WorkGuru. Because the transition was fairly, point and click with WorkGuru, they really tapped into us to extend the functionality that they needed. So inventory items, supplier side pricing, the kiosk capabilities, as well as the mobile app. And so it's just getting familiar with the terminology and the navigation and customization of that. But they had the disciplines in place to capture the quoting with very intricate detail, as you can imagine, with lots of these custom fabrication type businesses, they can, they'll sell anything they can get away with. So you have to be very, very flexible with how you cost things and how it sort of maps to the likes of Xero. And they really, because a lot of their staff are actually hourly based wage employees, the payroll integration piece was also quite critical for them to manage their large and growing workforce as well. So they've been on live earlier this year, so they've actually decided to sort of make the jump or make the move sooner rather than later, and it's given them that comfort to actually transition with some lead time and be able to sort of manage that process and mitigate that change, quite successfully there as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Heidi and Matthew. Now, what's great about working with Heidi and Matthew as your support in the cloud integration and the transition is they work with multiple solutions. So let's pass over and hear from you talking about project work case studies, which I'm very excited to hear about. Heidi, if we can start with you again.
Yeah, this is a really cool story of a development consultancy and surveying company who have multiple offices nationwide, and each office is a separate entity, separate legal entity. So that meant they did have 5 WorkflowMax files. They have to have 5 Xero files, obviously, to do all their compliance. But their team, a team from one location might be working on a project on another location, and vice versa. And so what that meant is sometimes a staff member would be set up in the WorkflowMax file that they needed to work on. Sometimes there'd be an intercompany recharge to account for the cost and the on charge of that time. As you can imagine, week in, week out, crossovers of projects and people between entities, it gets pretty complex and confusing quite soon. And so not only did they have kind of spreadsheets and methods to manage this, and not only were they a bit inconsistent across different offices and how they managed that, there was a lot of backflips involved when it came to invoicing, a lot of backflips involved when it comes to revenue forecasting, and then planning out resourcing and capacity, and then getting the data back on some KPIs around utilization and revenue per person. It's a lot when you've got a lot of people and projects and companies all housed in different houses essentially. So ProjectWorks has been a great fit for them. And the transition process, again, a bit around the data migration. ProjectWorks, as Matt said, they can consolidate multiple databases into the one ProjectWorks file. Now, that doesn't mean that it's one entity in there now. There's ways and means of slicing and dicing what company is which. But what that means is the data from the WorkflowMax files has been brought into ProjectWorks. Yes, there's going to be a cleanup process to ensure that the data is represented intentionally. For example, you might have the same person in a couple WorkflowMax files, but you don't want that person to three people in your ProjectWorks file. So there's a few things there that the ProjectWorks team just gets it really nice and concise and represented in a way that I guess the client gives some indication there. For as far as change management goes, in this case, the transition for timesheet users will be quite minimal. It'll be a different interface to work in with. However, if they're working on a project in a different office, they don't have to sign in and out of different files. So there will be new features that they will be using inside of ProjectWorks that they've been typically using outside. So spreadsheets for revenue forecasting, spreadsheets for capacity planning. And the transition for that will be, often is best to take a staged approach in terms of introducing those processes in. But for them, it's a really exciting opportunity to reset on how the business processes are done, as well as defining who's responsible and on what cadence, because being able to have that all in the one ProjectWorks is just such a game changer for them. So the outcome for them will be that visibility over resourcing, not just location at a single location, but across all related entities, as well as managing the revenue forecast across those multiple entities, all being able to be done within the one platform. So that will allow them to essentially solve the problems of the future now by having that really clear visibility, across those multiple entities, as well as having those metrics around staff utilization. Some of the processes that had to be manual for your intercompany recharges, that's going to be a lot more streamlined, not having to duplicate timesheet between different logins, and then at the end of the day, still having that beautiful connect between 5 entities under the one house and ProjectWorks, but then they're still being pushed through really neatly to the 5 legal entities in Xero. So huge consolidation, I guess, into a much more efficient solution for them. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Heidi. Now, Matthew, could you talk about your PR agency and drafting client that are now using ProjectWorks?
Yes, there are actually a couple of different examples, 2 different extremes. The PR agency, when we first met them, they were largely operating through spreadsheets. And so a couple of key things that we had to really focus on, they were already using something like HubSpot as their acting CRM. So that natural integration that ProjectWorks provided was crucial to transitioning. They were spending countless hours reconciling numerous meetings to keep the spreadsheets up to date. They're actually multi-location, not multi-office. And so they were always doing a lot of back and forth to validate their projects and budgets. Since implementing ProjectWorks, they've been able to forecast, resource plan a little bit more efficiently using the quoting through the projects. They're able to forecast, obviously with a large workforce, they're needing to track and manage their cash flow quite closely as a PR agency. They also really embraced the sort of leave application process native to ProjectWorks. Again, large workforce, lots of moving parts, people in and out of the office. So they've already found some gains there, and so they're actually have just recently gone live. So they'll be going through their next billing cycle, but full knowing that what their expected sort of cash flow or invoicing will be, because they're investing the time to build that out. With the drafting client in particular, they were a smaller business, partly offshore and partly onshore, so they distributed workforce as well. Their key requirements were having strong timesheet capability. They had very high-end clientele, and so they were making sure they accounted for all their time. They had some very particular set of requirements around how they wanted to quote, per draft, different varying prices required and attached to that. So complex pricing attached to that sort of draft process. One of the more complex businesses I've had to load into a software solution, but ProjectWorks was able to sort of help with that transition. Again, they were largely operating in spreadsheets and spending a lot of time reconciling. And so again, this is this upgrade to the operating system within the business just meant that they could charge accurately and invoice on time. Again, large clientele usually dictate the payment terms, so they really needed to be sure that they could charge in a timely fashion versus spreadsheets where it's prone to error. So they've been live for several months now, and they extended their capabilities through the BI reporting, Power BI reporting functionality as well to slice and dice their data in a far more flexible manner to their needs. So some case studies where integrations really made the difference to their businesses using ProjectWorks.
Thank you so much, Matthew. What is really exciting is that when we're working with expert cloud integrators and expert teams, they want the best for you. They want to match the client with the best solution. So let's talk to this slide, assessing the solution. If I can hand across to you, Heidi.
Sure. So we've got these three things here. What questions to ask, what are our desired outcomes, and post go live improvements. And I think that's a really neat way to kind of segment it out. So I every business is a little bit different in terms of the whether they need board level sign off to make a change versus a round table discussion to make sure that the key team members are happy. So asking, I think what do I need and what's working, what's not, where are we processing information in our business outside of our current platform? Those are all really good questions to ask. And then if you find it's quite a massive list, or perhaps you do need that board level sign off, I find running things through a Moscow status, which is must have, should have, could have, won't have, is a really good way to frame up, I guess, the ranking and the importance and the priority of some of those things that you do need in the business. The desired outcomes, I think for me, that all comes back to like, what problems do I need solved? Within there, you're going to have like, your more your hard metrics. We need X, Y, Z functionality that will solve this problem, and some of it will be a bit softer. We need our team to not be lost and confused. We need to have a bit of a plan to bridge that gap. And then post go live improvements. Again, I think having that conversation before you launch into something on how are we going to stage these additional features. Are we going to go lock, stock and barrel day one, we're using them all, or does it make a lot more sense, which in most cases it does, is to start off replicating like for like, and then in a kind of logical, systematic way introduce the new functionality, so that again you're kind of building that bridge for your team to walk over in a way that everything stays held together nicely in the changeover. So that's my take. I'm sure Matthew's got some things to add there too.
Yeah, for sure. I guess with what questions to ask, I like to sort of frame it up from two different perspectives. Namely, when I'm speaking with a new client, it's always at a management level, what they're wanting to achieve with a software transition. I always like to involve the wider workforce into that discussion as well, because they're going to have a point of view which is valuable. Quite often I find some business owners fairly handcuffed to the systems that they have in the business because they can't manage the change, and they're worried that it will rock the boat and so forth, and so that involving the workforce into the decision-making process actually helps build stronger connections to software. In terms of outcomes that are desired, predominantly the business owners are always looking for more real-time reporting and greater visibility, and the workforce are looking at usability, straightest path to outcome, and like for like type capability and functionality. So there's some considerations just to think about around who your audience is and trying to get that level of buy-in. And then with post go live, usually with the transition, what we like to do is pull back as much access as to almost to a minimum level of access, so that they're not having to make too many or be asked to do too much too soon, and then progressively load with additional capabilities as requested. We find that to be a nice way, especially where there's a lot of complexity. Segregation of duties can actually be far more better managed in comprehensive systems with better security controls as well. That's not the only approach, but certainly with some especially larger workforces like the PR agency that I was talking about earlier, is that large workforce, let's stem the flow of change that's being introduced and simply activate as necessary.
Thank you so much, Matthew. And let's move on to sort of the final segment, which is talking about preparation. Oh, and I went too fast. I went too fast. Finally got the clicker working and I went too fast. So getting everything ready. Heidi, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts, and some of them are reiterating things that have already been said. But in terms of exporting data, even if you're moving to WorkflowMax by BlueRock, I can't stress enough to export your data. Take a backup if there's specific reports or information that's really important that you're going to need to reference. Build those reports, export them out, make sure you have someone check the backups, make sure they're stored securely. multiple copies potentially, but make sure that your data is not left in the current WorkflowMax WorkflowMax product, whether you're moving to a new solution or moving to the Blue Rock solution, export the data. With mapping key business processes, one key thing that I'd say here is, don't make assumptions that and this is tricky because we don't know what we don't know, right? But don't make assumptions that the way that things work now are always going to be the way things work in another piece of software. Again, like if you're moving to ProjectWorks or WorkGuru or the Blue Rock product, laying out your processes, but then also testing them in the new software as early and as frequently as possible. The more that kind of can be weeded out prior to making the change, it's just feels better for everyone, because we can problem solve. You're always going to be problem solving along the process, but the earlier the better. I think there's going to be some resources sent out after this, but I have a 7-step process for implementation success resource that again helps you kind of walk through the stages that are going to be needed to make a changeover, to make sure that at each stage you've allowed the time, the people, the right things to be done, so that hopefully you can have a smooth and successful landing, and then move early. I kind of feel like we're already past the moving early stage, to be honest, but earlier the better. If you're moving to a product outside of Blue Rock, then I would encourage you to start that process ASAP. It need not be a stressful process, but I think the more time you have on your side, the better. We can often underestimate how much time is needed for ironing out bits and pieces. So the best chance of being smooth and calm is earlier the better. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Heidi. Matthew, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just a couple of points. Just with the exporting of data, I totally agree. Have backups and several of them if you can. One small consideration for some businesses who have used the likes of WorkflowMax to store files, consider leveraging Box or Dropbox or Google Drive integration just as a means to connect and propagate all your files off of WorkflowMax that support those documents. That's a really handy tip for those businesses who've got lots of file history. Then you can obviously park that somewhere and then turn off the storage management service. By exporting the data as well, you might even consider using some of the custom report capability to organize it in a way that you're more familiar with versus the backups, which are almost a series of tables. So the data is a very interdispersed if you haven't already attempted the backup. So I'd actually perform a reporting backup, a series of exports, as well as a convenience backup provided by WorkflowMax. In terms of key business processes, the data actually, when you export the data, can actually inform what's working really well inside the business and where some data capture points aren't being managed very well. It could be an opportunity to revisit how and what data points you actually want to maintain going forward by way of custom fields and standard field mapping as well. And I guess with the moving early point, as Heidi said, we're probably beyond the point where it's at the early stages, but I'd suggest and highly encourage that you think about trials for WorkGuru and ProjectWorks to evaluate the system's capabilities, so that you have a better idea of what the new options could look like in the future for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much there, Matthew. So now we're moving to the Q&A section of this session. I do encourage you to pop any questions in the Q&A box, but I would like to sort of open it up to our panelists. Are there any common questions that you're receiving that we haven't answered yet today, do you think?
Not so much a common question that we're getting, but I'd like to sort of tag on one of Heidi's points earlier on the common questions that you should ask as part of your discovery. And Heidi mentioned this when we were chatting about this yesterday, that one of the questions she asks is, what are your spreadsheets? I always think there's two questions that I used to ask when I was consulting, and it was, what are your spreadsheets is question number one, and then what do you double enter? Because basically those two things tell you what information is not readily available or useful inside the system that you've currently got, and so you're reverting to spreadsheets outside of it, and what do you double enter tells us where your process needs improvement, because you really shouldn't be double entering anything. So that's probably one of the two key questions that I think you should be all asking our clients, to go, all right, do we need something new? And if we need something new, whether it's WorkGuru or ProjectWorks, whatever it is, what are the gaps we're trying to fill? And those two questions will tell you probably 90% of the gaps in your client's process and data management.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Tony. And we do have a question from the audience. Are there checklists of what we should be exporting from WorkflowMax 1.0?
I don't know if there's an official checklist.
For ProjectWorks anyway, in the admin section of WorkflowMax, you can just go and do a full export. So if you've at least done that, then you should have your full data set somewhere on hand, regardless of which platform you do choose to go to in the future of a different one. So I would just do that. It's quite an easy, it's a single button. You go in, and then I think they send you an email maybe to a download link, and then you've at least got all bases covered.
Sure. From a WorkGuru point of view, yes, there is. There's a set of reports that we recommend that you run. You can do the full backup, but the set of reports that we recommend that you run it's on our help docs. And if you search WorkGuru to WorkflowMax to WorkGuru migration, there's a set of reports there to run. And fundamentally, the reason that we wrote those guides is because then it makes it super easy to import that stuff into WorkGuru, and it brings everything from your projects, your purchases, your timesheets, your costs on jobs, client staff, all of those kind of things as part of that checklist, Tony. So yes, we definitely have that, and there's a recommended set of steps that we think you should follow.
And in the follow-up email, we'll put a link to that, and we'll put a link to Heidi's 7 steps as well. So if we don't have any other questions, and there's nothing else to come from the panelists, I would like to ask, what's one thing that you want our listeners to take away from this session, and how can people get in contact with you? So if we can start with Heidi again.
Cool. So I'm a big believer in the phrase, life happens for me, not to me. And I think for a lot of our business community using WorkflowMax, yes, this change is something that's been forced upon us, but choosing to see it as something that can happen for us to make our businesses better, seeing it as an opportunity to improve, would be the major thing that I would be saying. You don't need to be fearful of the change, but you and your clients do need to take action.
Thank you so much, Heidi. It took me a while to figure out that saying, but I guess it's a glass half full saying. That's what we're going with.
That's the summary, yeah.
Matthew, Peng, can I go to you then?
Yeah, for sure. I have to echo what Heidi just said as well. I think that this is really an opportunity to relook at your business and figure out what could be improved, as well as what's working really well for your business. So that's what I try to instill with all of my clients as I sort of advise and looking through their data and their solution and options. They should be asking and expecting as much as they possibly can from the software. So asking those questions of the vendors as you're evaluating the systems is also going to be crucial if you don't have a product expert at hand.
Thank you. And to Matt Hayter.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. I think the takeaway that I'd like for everybody is, if you're in the consulting space, it's worth taking a look at least at ProjectWorks. We've got a great WorkflowMax rescue package to help waives the cost of onboarding. Even if you're currently planning to move across to Blue Rock, it's worth taking a look at your other options out there. If I can have one bonus one too, sorry Heather, I would reiterate, go into WorkflowMax and do that full data download. Even if you are planning to go across to WorkflowMax by Blue Rock and your data migrates across to there, as soon as the original WorkflowMax turns off, there is currently no way for you to export it and go to a different system. WorkflowMax by Blue Rock do not have an export function. So once you're in there, there's no way. So get it just to have in your back pocket.
Thank you very much, Matthew there. Now, before I pop to you, Tony, I have had another question. Woohoo! Do you know if there are any business grants available to help clients with the cost of the transition?
I'll take that one. Yes, there are definitely some. Don't waste the time trying to figure that stuff out between now and June 26. It just means you just can't start your project until the government gets around to approving it. So yes, Lee, there definitely is. Like there's some of the small business transformation stuff in Queensland, in particular, is what I know of. Yeah, I would not be waiting to get, because most of those you actually have to wait for government approval before you start the project or sign a contract to do it. So yes, but don't wait.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tony. And now, what's one thing you want our listeners to take away from the session, Tony?
Other than that, everyone has to do something, and that there are some awesome options out there, whether it's us or whether it's ProjectWorks. Work with professionals. Honestly, working with partners will make your life easier. They have experience running through things like your change management process, like adapting your business process. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what your current system is. When you change systems, things will change. Your business process will have to change to map to the new system. That will cause a change management requirement. And even migrating the data, there will be stuff that needs to be looked at and go, well, do we do this way or do it that way? Of the 1,000 apps in the Xero ecosystem, it's more than that now. I can't name 2 that describe a product in exactly the same way. So any data migration leads to change, which leads to process change and business management change. So really leverage people like Heidi and Matt Peng and use their experience to make this a good experience for yourselves and your clients. It's I strongly recommend using a good partner.
Yeah,
Great
absolutely.
advice. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, with that, we don't have any other questions. So with that, I'd like to thank our guest panelists, Heidi Seal, Matthew Peng, Matt Hayter, Tony Harcourt, and everyone at ProjectWorks and WorkGuru who assisted in the development and production of this webinar. Thank you for attending today's webinar presented by ProjectWorks and WorkGuru. Today's topic was There's Life Beyond WorkflowMax by Xero. I'm Heather Smith and I've been your host for today's session.
Right.
You can stop the recording now, Tony.
Thanks all. Thanks, Heather.
Thanks all. Thank you, Heather. It was great.
Yeah, thanks, Heather.
So much.
Very good.